Well, welcome to Walking in Spirit and Truth. I am one of your hosts, Sandi Craig, and we are so glad that you've joined us tonight. For the last several months, we have been slowly going through Psalm 23 and looking at it from a Hebrew perspective, from a shepherd's perspective, and in general, just looking at it from all sorts of directions. And I think we've learned a lot, and today is not going to be an exception to that rule because we are going to continue with this as we look at Psalm 23, verse 6. Now, before we get going, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My husband and I, we co pastor Life of Worship here in Amarillo, Texas. And we have several programs that we do on lambnetwork.tv. One is this show, of course, as well as Let Us Reason Together on Mondays at 8:30 Central, at 8:30 a.m. Central, and the War Room Prayers, which is also on Monday at 7:30 Central. And then I have another show that I do with Mr. Mark David Smith that is called The Planet Chapter. And so you can catch a little bit of us there and maybe in other places too. And you can always tune in to our YouTube channel. Normally it's Life of Worship Amarillo. And that's also our web address, Life of Worship Amarillo .org. But right now it's going to be another week before we're back on our regular channel. So we are on the J.L. Craig channel right now, but you can still get us and you're going to be able to watch all these archives on our YouTube channel. So please don't miss a beat. You can be, and if you're ever in Amarillo, Texas, or in the area on Saturday, on Shabbat, our tour portion starts at 12 p.m. Central, and our encounter service starts at 3 p.m. Central, and we would love for you to join us. Anyway, soon, hopefully, our other co-hosts will be popping in here. But until then, we're not going to stop. We're going to go on, and we're going to see what we can find out. Psalm 23, verse 6. Now, this one right here is this has got some really good stuff in it. Every word is so full of meaning and things that we need to take note of. We can't just overlook it. But let's read it together. Verse 6, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of Yahovah forever. It's great stuff, just even saying it. But this Hebrew word that we're going to look at tonight specifically is the word that is translated here as mercy. Other times it's translated as loving kindness, and you'll see it in different ways throughout Scripture. But we're going to speak of it as mercy tonight, or loving kindness, one of those, but specifically mercy. But the Hebrew word is hesed, Chesed. Now, this little word is so packed with meaning that there's really not a single word in English or in any other language for that matter that can come close to truly defining hesed. We try to with loving kindness, mercy, or other variations, but it does not define that word, any one single word or a couple of words, because it's got so much meaning inside of it. And it's been used approximately 248 times in Scripture, and it carries a lot of information about Yah's character himself. And it gives us this glimpse of this redemptive plan that he has for us, even in his very own nature. So what does it describe? Maybe that's the question. Well, again, we're only going to be able to scratch the surface a little bit here before we jump into the Hebrew, because Hesed is looking at or describing the active love between Yah and his people. And that is deep. The depth of his love we could never fathom nor understand. Because of his hesed, because of his loving kindness, because of his mercy, Yah promised Israel that he would never leave them or forsake them. Actually, he said that to you and to me, because his word is true. It does not return void. That's a promise that we should hold on to. I will never leave you, nor will I forsake you. That's his mercy. That's his loving kindness. He kept his covenant with Israel. He keeps his covenant because he is the covenant maker. He's the covenant keeper. And so we can stand upon that and be assured of who he is. So his promises in his word, they hold power. Why? Because that's who God is. That's who Yah is. Let's look at Nehemiah 9:17. It says, they refused to listen and failed to remember the miracles you performed among them. They became stiff necked and in their rebellion appointed a leader in order to return to their slavery. But you are a forgiving Yah, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in hesed. Therefore, you do not desert them. The word in this variation, in this translation, is love. For you are slow to anger and abounding in love. Hesed. Okay. He is slow to anger and abounding in love. Now, to get some further understanding of this word, let's look at Isaiah 54:10. Though the mountains be shaken and the hills be removed, yet my unfailing love, Hesed, for you will not be shaken, nor my covenant of peace be removed, says Yahovah, who has compassion on you. Okay, so both of the translations here show love as this hesed, part of Yah's character, who he is, how part of the ways we can understand him. Now let's look at Psalm 89, verse 4. It says, I will declare that your love, Hesed, stands firm forever, that you have established your faithfulness in heaven itself. You said, I have made a covenant with my chosen one. I have sworn to David, my servant, I will establish your line forever and make your throne firm through all generations. There we have it. One more time. I will declare that your love, your Hesed. Okay, so here we see that Hesed has this intimacy attached to it of Yah's love for his people. It's not some surface thing, not how we would say, which we're so fickle as people when we say we love. One moment we love, one moment we hate. And I've heard there's a fine line between the two, but we seem to be very fickle with our emotions. And we have a Yah that is not fickle. We have a Yah that when he says he loves us with an everlasting love, that Hesed, that's deeper than we could fathom, that he truly does. See, biblical translators and scholars throughout time, throughout the ages, they have tried to put a simple definition on the word Hesed so that we could understand it better as people, as humans. And I'm telling you, in every language except Hebrew does not do this word justice. So no matter how many times we translate it, loving kindness, love, devotion, mercy, strength, grace, purity, loyalty, tenderness, steadfastness, none of those words by themselves even come close to showing us who Yah is and what his character is as defined in Hesed, because the word is so deep. It is impossible to define Hesed apart from the fullness of Yah's character, because Hesed's particular brand of love is supernatural love. It is multifaceted like a diamond. It's a multifaceted love that can only be realized, practiced, and experienced through Yahweh himself. That's Hesed in part. Okay. So what else do I have to say about that? Well, let's look at some more examples of this before we look into the Hebrew, because Yah loved Israel. He loves his people with an infinite Hesed. His children were required also to carry Hesed, to walk in Hesed in their relationships. Would you agree or disagree with that we need to walk in love?
No, absolutely.
All right. So let's look at Micah chapter 6, verse 8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does Yah require of you? To act justly and to love Hesed, mercy, and to walk humbly with your Yah, with your God. Now that is a scripture that we've held on to for a long time. You'll hear it in the International Houses of Prayer a lot with Mike Bickle, but it has so much meaning because it really describes part of what is required of you and me. Do we act justly at all times? Do we show mercy? Do we love? Do we walk humbly? Do we? These questions we need to really contemplate our own actions and measure them, because to ourselves at the very least, because we would probably all falter or fail in some area. Okay, let's look at some examples of this hesed. Okay, so let's turn to Ruth 1:16. Ruth 1:16.
I'm trying to get there.
Okay,
I
because
Yeah, I've just had some issues
okay,
here. Okay, 116.
yes.
Okay, so it says, and Ruth said, entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God.
All right. So here we have this story of Ruth and Boaz, and it's this wonderful example of Hesed, because Ruth displayed this sacrificial love when she forfeited her own home and life so that she could care for her mother-in-law, Naomi. And then when Boaz became her kinsman redeemer of Naomi's family, that was also selfless love. So we see Hesed at work one more time in this way that will eventually lead to the birth of our Messiah, Yeshua. Now that's pretty amazing. And then we have another example that we can look at in 1 Samuel 18:3. And this is going to be looking at Jonathan and David and that relationship there, because we all know that it was this close personal friendship, but it was also founded on Hesed. It was founded on this loving kindness, on the mercy, on the steadfastness, on the grace, on the purity, on all the definitions that we had put on this word. That's what we see in this relationship. And we even see after Jonathan's death that David sought to remain true to this very thing. Even though Jonathan was gone, Hesed remained because he sought out and honored his heir. He was going to keep that word. All right, do we have that?
Yes, it 1 Samuel 18:3. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself.
All right, Hesed. So, one more time, he loved him as himself. So, that's another definition. How does Yah love us? Well, and then we can look at Joshua 2:12 through 13, because when Joshua sent spies into Jericho in preparation for what was to come, what happened? There was a woman there named Rahab, and she was there, and she had an agreement with the Hebrew people to spare her life and her family's life. And it says there, now then, please swear to me by Yahweh that you will show kindness, has said, to my family, because I have shown kindness, has said to you. Give me sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father, my mother, and my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. It does your version say kindness as well on in your scripture?
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay,
I'm
well, that's
sorry.
okay. We'll go on, because one more time we see this plea. Hey, show kindness, show chesed to us, show that mercy, show us that same thing that Yah has given us. Yes, we're expected to do the same. And then we have Esther 2:9. I want you to turn there if you would. Esther 2:9. And it gives us this example of Hesed. It's presented before King Xerxes as, because Esther's this potential bride, potential wife. And what happened? She pleased him and won his favor, his Hesed. Did you have that?
Yes, Esther 2:9. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given to her out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women.
Okay. So we see here in that verse, we see that she pleased him and won his favor, Hesed. I'm not sure that was
It was
Lauding him.
kindness. Yeah, her maiden, and the maiden pleased him, and she obtained chesed of him.
Okay. Pleased him and won his favor, Hesed. So the king's love for Esther, for Hadassah, was not human inspired, not at all. It was Hesed that was planted by Yah within the king to reveal Yah's Hesed for Esther, to reveal Yah's Hesed for his people, and to fulfill his plan to save the whole of the Hebrew people, because his ways are not our ways. Yah moved within Xerxes. Yah moved within him, and there was a heart change, or something happened within the heart. So these are all examples of Hesed shown in the Tanakh, and it was lived out by Yah's grace through what he was doing within each of them. But each of those examples teach us something about Yah's love, because it's this foreshadow of Yeshua's love for us. And it's pretty amazing to think how all encompassing this word could be. If we would not just see it as a plain written word in a text and skim over it, if we would think and contemplate the immensity of the depth of this word when we're referring to the character of Yah and what we are also to carry with us, it's going to change our perspective in the way we treat one another, because we have received so much in return. So let's go on and let's define this thing in Hebrew. So it's number 2618, and chesed, vachesed, is what the phrase is when you're looking at Psalm 26. And again, remember, there's not a good English translation, okay? Because the word is too big to be captured by any single translation here. So what do we have here? Well, to spell it is a vav, a het, a samach, and a dalet. So let's go through those. We haven't done that in a little bit in detail, but we're going to do it again tonight. This vav, this hook, the vachesed. What is it? It's this thing, this connector, that thing that separates two objects, that separates us maybe from the rest of the world. Aren't we supposed to be set apart? Absolutely, we are. And it secures us, because what happens with a nail and a hook? It secures something. If you put it in a tent, it secures it from blowing away. If you put a nail on the wall to hang a picture, it secures that picture. So here we have this security that's provided from this vav, from this nail, from this hook. And then we have the het. And the het is also this picture of something that separates, divides, a hedge, a refuge, a security, uh, a fence. Here we have the het, some type of enclosure. And what do enclosures do? One more time, just as we sort of talked about connecting two separate objects, when those are connected with the vav, the het shows us that there's this separation that occurs from whatever we're being hedged in from whatever boundary that's around us to protect us from what's out there. Okay? So we have this connection to this hedge. Who is the hedge? Well, it's Yeshua, of course. Who is the security? It's Yeshua, of course. The paleo head is this picture of all of this enclosure, this hedge, this border, this fence that brings protection. It's this picture of the Torah and the commands, which as well, what do they do around us? They form this boundary line, and it depends on how we stand concerning them, determines whether we're in the house of our Father or we're outside that fence in somebody else's house. Are we in covenant? Or are we out of covenant? So now, just with those two letters, we are secured. We are secured through this fence, this boundary that separates us with the commands. And then we have this samach. And what is the samach? Well, you look at it, and it's often considered this shelter, but it's also considered a proper support and something to support or to surround. So now we have a borderline, we have a fence, we have this hedge, this that separates us. And then with the samach, we have that surrounds us. And then we have the dalet. Well, we all know what the dalet is. It's the door. It's Yeshua, right? So put all together, we have this picture of this security that in the paleo, when we look at this word vahased, that we are within if we are in covenant. Because this dalit, by if we think about this doorway, because doorways are very important in covenant, they and around each doorway or at the bottom of each doorway is is this threshold, and by crossing over the threshold, you enter into covenant with whatever's in that house. Now, whose house do we need to belong to? We need to belong to the house of Yah. We are his people in his house. So we go by his rules. What are his rules? His rules are the Torah. His rules are written there for us, and they are for our protection. Just like we talked about earlier, they are the one things that hedge us in themselves because he is the door. He is the Torah. So what it has said, secure, separate, surround, door, to separate, to surround, and and the door that secures us to the fence or the commands that separate us and supports us by the door.
You know what it makes me think about there, Sandy? This is a really, really good description of the the what Yeshua was talking about, not only him being the door, but him being the good shepherd. And of course, where are we? We're talking about being the good shepherd, and how a shepherd would build a hedge to put, like a corral to put his sheep in overnight. And there would be a doorway or an entrance to it, and it would be often made of thorns, like a bramble, that type of thing. So there's where we get that samach, which is the picture of the thorns. But it's a this hedge of protection. You also said the wall. It
Surround.
was so we have a
Yeah.
surrounding wall, a surrounding hedge of protection with a doorway by which the sheep would go in and be protected as they're gathered, and then the shepherd would lay at the door
Yes.
and protect the doorway. And so we have that dalit at
The
the end.
shepherd was the door then.
He was the door, and so it's more than so when we look at the issue of chesed, a lot of times we think of it, and we think in our Western and our Greek mindset that it is an adjective, but in reality, it's not an adjective. It's more. It's not, and it is. Thinking Hebraically, we're thinking about the action of the word and the action of the meaning of that. Because what does it do? What does mercy do? And then you say, but you step back, and one other aspect is the, who is mercy, because the door is the representation of Yeshua. He puts that hedge of protection around us, and then he stands to guard it himself. So mercy is more than just loving kindness, where our English translations are just, English is just an inferior language, but the totality of this word is that from the place of protection, we have everything we need
Right.
because Yeshua is the door. He is the one that is that good shepherd who who lays down his life for his sheep. So I was just kind of looking at, you were giving such a good description of that, and I was just thinking about, and I was thinking even about how the scriptures talk about how the the people, Yah's people at the end time will be gathered in a place called Basra, uh, which was a natural place to bring your
Surround.
sheep and be surrounded and be protected and
Secured.
secured, and all of that fits in. So yes, it's loving kindness. Yes, it's mercy. Yes, we have this action of the bowing of the neck. It's kind of that that a humble position of strength and favor that that Yeshua himself is extending his life on behalf of ours.
That's good. That's really good. I'm glad you brought up that example, that because it's very visual when you think of that bramble surrounding the sheep and the shepherd and securing the sheep, and the shepherd acting as the door, who was the door, to protect and make sure nothing came upon the sheep. And that's exactly what this whole psalm has been about, is that relationship between the shepherd and his sheep, and how he protects us and takes care of us. And that's what Yah is for us. This has said, if we're to think about the most single descriptive term of the character of Yah, then it would be a part this. He's separating, he's surrounding, and the door. What kind of image would we have? Exactly what we've just spoken. We for sure need to think about a house, because we are part of a people that abide in a house, so to speak. Maybe not a physical house together, but we abide in his house if we are in covenant with him. And that covenant is what surrounds us. That covenant, and if the word is the covenant, the Torah, and Yeshua is the word, then it's Yeshua who surrounds us. So not only is the door, he is the hedge.
And then
And we
you earlier you had mentioned that in I guess in one of the passages where it was talking about the Vachesed, and so
it's
you
Psalm 23.
Psalm 23. Okay, so here we have, you were talking about the connection and all of that, but it's that that is the tent peg. It's that which is, it secures. So Yeshua himself, it secures uh, his mercy for us as he
Mm-hmm.
lays down at the doorway. But, or, he lays down his life for us. Or you can also think of it, because the tent peg speaks about the hook. And I oftentimes, now I think this is a broad, in, so allow me to go this direction. But when it's talking about the hook, then, the shepherd's crook, in the sense of modern, maybe modern, like more like England, where they had the shepherd's crook, not as opposed to what you had shown and discussed in terms of what the shepherd's staff was like. But I was just thinking, yeah, if we get too far outside of his mercy, or that place of protection, that place of security, he's got that way to pull us back and pull us back in.
Well,
Because
remember, there were two items. One was a hook-like thing, and the other was that ball-like thing,
yeah, right,
that the shepherd carried. So absolutely, he knows how to get us back, but we can still fight it, and we can still choose to go away, for
yeah,
sure. So I want us to remember that we have a house and a door, and that it's separate from something that surrounds. So we have this covenant and this inclusion and entry, adore this idea of Yeshua. So the action of his said is, when you picture all of this, the action that goes along with this noun, and by the way, mercy is a noun. um, we see ourselves in circumstances that make us different than everybody else. Okay.
yeah,
We are in this world, but not of this world. We are supposed to be different, right? So if we are in his house, if we are in this relationship, and in this case, the sheep, there's more than one. So we're in this community relationship, and this life, this hedge is surrounding us. And what is happening in our lives involves that Torah, that hedge, and it should be involve every part of our lives, every single thing. The word should saturate our lives, and our lives should be led by that word, so that it's almost like you can't separate the two. So this Hesed requires us to be a community. For one, it does require community, but it requires us to be different than the rest of the world. It requires us to acquiesce to that separation, because if we're surrounded by the hedge and we keep trying to go over that hedge, then we're no longer separate. We're no longer in that protection. That covering that's been along with us is gone.
yeah.
So
It goes right along with that. So here, it's not just one sheep that's in the pen, it's the flock that's in the pen. But when you look at the definition, in the Hebrew language, a lot of times you have two opposite things coming from the same word. And you can also look at this word as being reproach or wicked. And it's like, well, how can those two opposite meaning words or concepts be encapsulated with one verse? But but when you're talking about that separation, with that wall, that fence, and then the samach, the thorns, it's on one side is where you find the favor, the goodness, that mercy, and on the outside that is not allowed in is that which is wicked
Yes, or evil, Ra.
or evil.
Yes.
Yes. And so,
And
uh,
that would cause us not to fulfill the purposes for which he's called us.
yes, yeah. So inside we fulfill his purposes. That's how do we fulfill the will of God? We fulfill the will of God by walking out the Torah. We fulfill the will of God by being inspired by the Torah. By We fulfill the law by because it draws us into this loving kindness, this wonderful relationship, outside of which, when people say, "Oh, you're under the law," why are you under the law? No, I'm in that place of protection. Even like this week's Torah portion, we were talking about it yesterday on Let Us Reason, where in Kitavo, and it's going into the blessings and the curses. We see the place where what happens when one is within the sheepfold, in that protected place, we see blessings. But outside, where it's wicked, it's like in the place of the kingdom, or the place of the kingdom of light, and outside is the kingdom of darkness. And when you look at Deuteronomy 28, the curses has a much greater, huge list, a much longer list than the blessing. Why? Because the darkness that surrounds is vast, and
True.
and so, uh, but all of that is what happens when one does not shema, to hear, to do, to listen, to guard, to obey, to protect. And isn't that interesting how even Shema, where we out of which we get the word shamar, which means to guard. Isn't that interesting how that even falls into alignment with this word mercy? Is that inside we're guarded? So we want to guard and protect His good word, because that is how we demonstrate our love for Him. That if we love Him, we'll keep His commandments. But uh, but so we keep those commandments because we guard them in our heart. It's the expression of the very core of our being. But He guards us then from that darkness, so it does not encroach, because He's of course the light that separates the kingdom from the kingdom of darkness, or the evil one.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I I don't want us to leave this program this evening without really emphasizing that there needs to be something different about us, and ask ourselves this question: are we different than everybody else around us? Are we hated? I'm not saying you have to be hated, but oftentimes things that are different, if you don't fall in line with the general masses, then you're considered the evil one. You're considered the wrong one. But we need to live a life that's observantly demonstrable, or in everything that we do, it needs to show that we are different than everybody else. It's got to. That our community, the people that call themselves people of Yah, are different, that we follow Yah, because it should draw this definite line of those who do love Him, who serve Him, who live for Him, and those who may know of Him, they don't live for Him. And that brings us back to this word avodah. which is the word for worship or work or service. And here's part of our problem why we don't live for Him in everything, because we compartmentalize this word. I've talked about this before. We think of work is different than worship, which is different than service. We think of work as employment, but that's not the mindset of a Hebrew. A Hebrew person thinks of work as his deeds. What's he doing? What is she doing? It's everything your life produces, including your family. It's your community. It's your home. It's your geography. It's your place where you worship. It is how you worship Yah. It is how you embrace life. It is how you think. And because Hebrew is action related, we don't just think, we do. So when we talk about avodah, our service, our worship to Him, it's all through our deeds, and everything we do should be as unto Yah, to give Him glory, to make His name famous, not infamous, because we put stains upon His name because of the way we act. Our avodah, our work, is not the work of employment; it's our worship. Are we worshiping Him in everything we do? Because that's what's going to separate us from the rest of the world. If I only think of work as what I do at a job, or what jobs I do for Yah, as a, then we have missed out on what worship is and what service is. In Hebrew, avodah is all your deeds, everything you do, and this loving kindness, this mercy, this love, this purity, this, all of it, this hesed embraces every one of those deeds. The things with our family, the things with our friends, our job, our our congregation, our community, our address, because of the city, the neighborhood we live in, the state, the nation. All of it is affected because hesed and our deeds, they go hand in hand. How are we living? Are we living with that same infinite character trait of Hesed that Yah gives us, at least in the little bit of understanding that we do have for it? I think we could probably all do a better job. Are our deeds full of that mercy, loving kindness, love? That means everything, guys. Everything our hand touches, everything we do, and I dare say everything we say. Does it have this measure of Hesed in it? And I think that's about all we have time for tonight. So,
Well, let me say something else with that as well, Sandy, because let's connect the dots. And you had mentioned it's because we have Tov v'Chesed. Uh, so the goodness, the Tov, and the Hesed are, they're locked together. They're joined
yes,
together. They're not separated, and so they come into this partnership of, so one, that mercy is where we're living out with the, shall we say, the scepter of Yah in favor being extended over our lives, and that goes into all the meanings we've been talking about it, and the perfection that he is made, that he is putting that which cannot be improved upon into our lives. So and then and as we'll go into the latter days, or the latter days, in the next week, and as we continue to break this down, shall follow me, and there's a lot to that we need to unpack. But when you have this perfection of goodness, that which cannot be improved upon, and then this thing of chesed, of this amazing amount of protection and provision and favor and mercy, and all of that goes along with this loving kindness that's just poured out, is just like, just warm oil, bathing in warm oil. It just, you can't express that, the presence of His glory, together with the action of His completed work that cannot be improved upon, and it's chasing after us. That that locks us in forever.
but remember, it should be also following us, following us.
Yeah,
Because we
following
leave
us.
that, remember a couple programs ago, I talked about how that trail is left wherever we go.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
leave a trail of the Tovah Hased
The aroma of his presence.
and the
Yeah.
works and the deeds.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
The
it
deeds for
cannot be
Hased.
denied. Exactly.
All right.
Well, good
Well, we want
deal.
to thank you for joining us this evening. I am going to get out while John closes the program, and we will see you next week as we continue on verse 6.
Okay.
Shalom.
All right. Thank you, Sandy. And we are going to be jumping over into the next program, which is the Craig Report. We'd love for y'all to stay here on the network, lamnetwork.tv, and join us. Also, it'll also be coming through on Twitch and the JL Craig channel, since we are still in YouTube jail on the Life of Worship channel for 6 more days. And so join us here on the other side. A lot of things we need to get caught up on. Let me just say that. So until next time, shalom.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.